Hey guys, welcome to a bonus episode of the 706 podcast, or taking after our friend Sean Parker, 706 podcast. Here to talk about a new video game, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild.
I got a couple weeks now.
Yeah, and we have these guys are two Zelda super fans I'm at the table with here. Have you guys both played every title in the series?
I believe I've played everything through, with maybe the exception of the Minish Cap. At least, I've played every main console game. I think the Minish Cap is the one on the handheld I missed.
Yeah.
I haven't played Tingle's Freshly Picked Rosy Colored Rupee Land, and I haven't played Tetra Trackers.
I have watched.
Will that give you an indication? No, I haven't. I haven't beaten Zelda 2.
Okay.
Isn't that considered the bad one?
Bad one. It's an oddball, but
let's not say bad.
The sword combat, that kind of thing, it did carry over into the next games. Yeah, but it's definitely an oddball. And Link to the Past was like an effort to recapture the original game. So yeah, you could say it's bad.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, well, on to the topic at hand. So I see we got a little outline here, but I guess in general, okay. As we have theme. What is the theme of The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild?
Well, when I said theme, I'm kind of curious because Connor and I have talked, and I'm just going to put it out there that I'm kind of scared of the superfan label. It's a very daunting thing that Tony has assigned me.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just start. So theme. So, I have my own ideas for many of the games. I've always loved to view Majora's Mask as the regret of the conquering hero, the sort of Mark Zuckerberg of the Zelda games, the man who, on the surface, should have had everything and is now left desolate without a friend. And I've seen Majora's Mask as sort of the longing for something else.
The Dark Twin of Ocarina of Time and longing,
Yeah, and I come to Breath of the Wild, and Connor has recently finished the main storyline. I finished it a couple days ago, and there's still much to explore. But we both came out saying the story was lacking. In terms of a theme, unlike the other console ones, I didn't feel something kind of grappling out towards me to sort of, if I were to sit down and write a paper for a dissertation, nothing that popped out made me want to sit down and start writing right away. I wonder, what did Connor think, though?
I would say there is a strong theme, and this came to me across more in the promotional material for the game and sort of in the lead up, all the little interviews and trailers I was watching. See Nintendo themselves kind of hyping up the game. There was, I think, a distinct theme emerge, which was the theme open air. The words open air, the word Breath of the Wild speaks to that. There is a reference to a kind of, what's it called, gouache painting, a kind of open air painting, which was sort of the inspiration for the art style of the game. The idea of even the cooking pot, open air cooking, a sort of an emphasis on, and the people saying, this is going to get people want to go camping. And I have to say it did. This is a game that really was all about exploration, and it was the open world Zelda game without any kind of asterisks around that. Pure open world. You can literally go. You can go anywhere. The approach to the story itself is also bare bones to allow you that feeling of open air, being able to free to explore. That is a huge theme of the game. The other theme of the game is, I think, technology versus nature. There's the theme of the Sheikah Guardians. Yeah. There's a theme of and I think it is borrowing a lot from Miyazaki without necessarily quite as much thematic stuff to chew on, but it has that, just at least that visual language of technology versus nature. That opposition, and of course, I think it's important, and like many Zelda games, it fits into tradition about the world being somehow ruined. I think that to me goes back to even Ocarina of Time. You're already in a ruined Hyrule. Likewise, Legend of Zelda, the first game, that game we were sort of in a ruined Hyrule without people in it. And I thought this game really tried to sell that across when you're journeying through ruins and seeing all these old things and trying to kind of piece together what happened.
Mm-hmm. I love the open air, the exploration. I love at the end of Skyward Sword, there's that great question Zelda poses to Link of what are you going to do now? And I felt like for the first time the answer was open-ended for a character to sort of take over and, for the avatar to just explore and whatnot. The idea, though, of the game as, of seeing the ruin and kind of what emerges from it has seemed to be the theme of every single Zelda game, like you said, from Wind Waker to the shattering of the kingdom, to starting something new, the end of Twilight Realm, what's happening. But Breath of the Wild, what really fascinates me, and just like these players who have explored Ocarina of Time, is to adventure from one area and not learn anything about its history from a character, or at least that I've stumbled upon. To see the Temple of Time, ruined right away is actually a very nostalgic memory for a gamer.
Very. When you almost stumble upon it, you don't come at it from the front as you do in every other game.
Yeah.
But you come at it from the side. So it's just there.
And the temple is huge. It's for the first time it really does feel like the church, like a mythic sort of thing.
And the old man does hype it up. He says, this was a place where the word for ages past, or since forgotten ages, or since time immemorial. That the word keeps on coming up. The word time immemorial. Just listen, look for that phrase. The old man says that sacred rites have been performed in the temple since time immemorial. It's commenting not only on the feeling of history that you're observing, but it's based on your own history with the Zelda franchise. This is a game that, like Skyward Sword, is intensely self-conscious about its own fitting at the end of a long line of really acclaimed Zelda games, and that it's trying to play upon your memory.
And I think that connects to the final big point I've always loved in every Zelda game is the idea, and it is very strong here, is the idea of memory. The idea of connecting memory and story together, and what the story means to succeeding generations. And for the first time we have a Link that is actually part of the story that people are talking about in the games, and is only now, though, but doesn't actually have the memory of it. You are re-experiencing it like every Zelda game before.
Explain what you mean. What are the memories? So let's just
so throughout the game, the main storyline is actually told through mainly a series of flashbacks.
Right.
There's a part where you have this sort of iPad-like device, the Sheikah Slate, that contains photos of the time when you were Princess Zelda's knight, her sort of main guardian.
Yeah.
And it's up to you whether you find him or not, but you find certain places that are indicated in these photos, and you unlock basically the past of these events that have been leading up to the great event, the great calamity that you're still trying to solve and defeat today, or in the present day of the game.
Right. So there was a failure in the past, and now you're just 100 years later, you've picked up right where you left off and are trying to stop it. Yeah. And
the game seems to be indicating, though, that the memory, it wants to remind us constantly that memory is finite, that the Temple of Time doesn't really have a current priest or priestess, that nature itself is sort of eroding the sculptures and the temples and the buildings everywhere, and that constantly we're seeing grass, rain, and dirt just const up and erupt, which I think is absolutely fascinating.
Really a lot of visual flair.
I don't want to hog, though. So
right, and I did want to move on to characters, if that was what Tony was going to do. Do you have anything to add, Tony?
I think you guys basically nailed it. Let's talk about those characters. What about them, guys?
Okay, so characters. I mean, here's the thing. Characters, and I would like to discuss, of course, voice acting as well. This is a big controversial thing. This is the way the game tells its story, is through these cutscenes. Cutscenes that you unlock through journeying through the world. Again, fits the theme. They're not going to throw the story at you. You come and find the story. In fact, you have to collect the story, ultimately, the story is, I think, a lot more minimal. There's not as many beats or things going on in it. But just on the level of satisfaction, did you feel the same kind of satisfaction that you got a good arc, you got a good story told? Were you interested in the characters? How did you feel about that, Anthony?
Okay, well, I'll start off and I'll say do you know offhand when Spirit Tracks was released?
Spirit Tracks was 2012, 11.
Okay, well, I'll say this, is that post-Twilight Princess, I have felt like Nintendo has made a very conscious effort to improve Zelda as a character.
Yes.
I think in Skyward Sword, she's the perfect, the crush. In Twilight Princess, she's non-existent, right? And Spirit Tracks, which we've discussed, is Connor's favorite.
Yeah, maybe one. Yeah, it's my favorite.
Spirit Tracks is 2009, by the way.
Okay, so right immediately after sort of Twilight Princess, almost.
Right.
And I think in this game, I think Zelda's actually a great character. I think we get a sense of her frustration. I think the voice acting of her in the American English version, it came around for me. It didn't work at first, but towards the end, I get it.
I was perfect. So into it by the end. That was the thing that I did a total. I was telling the guys I did a total 360 on this, and this was, I think, the whole reaction to that first English language trailer with voice acting was outrage that Zelda sounds so bad compared to her Japanese voice actor. And I bought into this too when you first get to the king, when he starts voice acting, I'm like, voice acting in this game is just a write-off. It sucks.
Yeah.
It was their first time doing it. They didn't know what to do. They got the cheapest actors.
Yeah, they went the four kids route.
They got like Cortana from Halo. They clearly it wasn't cheap.
They got some big famous English dub voice actors.
They did for sure. But I thought Zelda was a pitch perfect choice, and I'm really into. I don't know who the voice actress was, but I think it was such an interesting performance. It was diametrically opposed to the Japanese voice actor performance, but it was very subtle. It had the thing of the royalty. She does affect this very old school British accent. That's kind of interesting, and that befits Zelda. I think Zelda. I think we'll get to this to discuss the ending. I think Zelda here in this game is not just Zelda as in a character named Zelda, but she's filling in and representing the franchise as a whole. I think she kind of is a symbol almost.
Right.
So I think the fact that she is this queenly sort of language kind of befits.
And that voice, I love.
Franchise.
It has the tiniest hint of frustration constantly.
Yes, she's a messed up character.
She's
got
Feld
psychological
character,
issues. Yeah.
She's a Feld character basically in the game. She
Yeah.
doesn't live up to the expectations of the princess. She doesn't live up to the religious aspects of one either.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fascinating to see how reliant she actually is, despite not wanting to be upon Link and the other characters around her.
Her dad gives her a hard time.
Yeah,
one memory is brutal.
In many ways, it's sort of a classic, the story of the fantasy novel. But I mean, it works so perfectly well, and it transcends those tropes. For me, personally, however, I will say that outside of Zelda, I should say the cutscenes are done really well. I think the animations are.
They end
awesome.
up, I think, really paying off. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're very beautiful to look at. But I think voice acting. They did not hit the mark for practically any other character like they do Zelda. I think Rito is interesting, but I think too often they had all these actors come in and record 2 lines.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? What's the point?
Go home. Yeah, no, it didn't feel like it got the attention it deserved, the voice acting. I mean, like I said, a lot of these characters were voice actors that I like. The guy who did the Rito character, Rivali, he had an interesting thing to do, and I like that voice actor. Likewise with Urbosa, the Gerudo, I thought she was actually pretty good. They're pretty flat characters, let's say, and that you can already read them. You already know what they're going to say once you've gotten a sense of their character. Zelda being the one exception. She kind of... we don't see development per se, but she's complex enough that depending on which memory you're picking, you get to see a different side of her, and that's really interesting.
Yeah, and let's just also include the moment of Link's character when you wander into Zelda's chambers in Hyrule Castle, and you see the little note about why Link
I was going to ask the diary. The diary is so important. Please, everyone, if you have not read the diary, please go to Hyrule Castle. Find Zelda's bedroom. It's near to Zelda's study where you find the memory. Go find that, okay?
Yeah, spoiler
and
alert.
read it and then come back because
when you see that diary and you realize that Link doesn't like to talk because he's placing the burden of everybody on his shoulders.
The pressure of legacy, the pressure of being the hero and being expected to save the world.
And it goes
is
back
enough to make him silent. So it's amazing.
It goes back to memory, though, like what we were talking about earlier. He has the knowledge of what he's supposed to be, but he's
paralyzed by previous links. It's so cool.
It's amazing.
But okay.
I was going to say zoom out real quick though, but with the rest of the characters, this is a problem I think open world of games is you don't have the benefit of linearity to keep characters in your reminder all the time, but. Yeah, the characters in this game are some of the weakest, I think, of a console Zelda game. I think Twilight Princess certainly has some of the better supporting characters, and Majora's Mask has a very, the benefit of having such a weird topsy-turvy world to its aid. Yeah. But sorry,
memorable for sure. But yeah, sorry, the diary, and I did want to mention. Negative shout out to Mifa. I thought that character was lame.
The worst.
The romance story that just got lame. There was a lot of. I was beginning to see a pattern towards my early playthrough of the game. That there was all this stuff about Link being kind of an object of women's affections, which I thought was a little bit kind of exploitative, and a little bit like, hey, male gamer, this is for you. The character who's helps Impa in
Yeah, the
Kakariko
one who's in
village,
love, the
who's
daughter,
like shy,
the
like,
granddaughter.
"Ooh, a man!" Yeah.
Yeah.
That I thought was a little bit just over the top, and Mifa being like, "Ooh," this,
Yeah, and constantly the
that character kinda
saleswoman,
sucked.
the salespeople, especially the women ones, are always like, "You're just my type." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you talk to the right one, they're like, "Wow, look at you."
Yeah, there's a
Like,
lot of that. So I think it kind of regressed a little bit in terms of that. If you compare it to Wind Waker and stuff like that, I think it did regress a little bit into kind of fan service. Zelda has never been ahead of the pack when it comes to gender. Although this is a game where you do get to cross dress, which is kind of a spit in the face of all the people who wanted to see a female Link. But anyway, I'm losing my beat here. Now I want to discuss the ending of the game.
all right.
So, boss fight, Calamity Ganon. First of all, were you surprised? How Calamity Ganon appeared?
I mean, we get the early hint. I mean, at least before the fight, that Ganon is in his purest state of, basically hatred. We know that we're not going to see the Ganondorf of Twilight Princess or Wind Waker, the sort of humanoid figure. What we see throughout the game, surrounding Hyrule Castle is that boar, that pig of just evil.
Yeah.
That when I get to the end of the game, though, I think we both agree the actual fight is kind of lame.
Fight's lame. Super lame. Second phase.
Sure. What I'm actually interested in, though, is leading up to that moment, is the Hyrule Castle, though, is amazing.
Great
It
sequence.
is so fascinating.
Amazing
Like, I want to
sequence.
go back and just, look at each wall and
Yes.
see, the theories
Yeah.
people are coming up with. Yeah. But, that ending fight is kind of lame, I think. I think we could all agree that, personally, my favorite boss fight is the Zora one, when you're being pulled by Rito, and you're shooting the lightning arrows, the electric arrows, at the Divine Beast.
Oh, okay.
I wouldn't call it a boss fight,
right.
but the preliminary
There's
one.
there's the fight with the Divine Beast itself to get into it, and then, those I always thought they were okay, but
Okay, I
like the sand one the best, just for the dynamic quality of it. But yeah, I mean, and to mention the Divine Beast, I think we're on the same page. A lot of people are on the same page. They're a little bit too short. They're creative. They're interesting. They're not different enough from the shrines. We've covered that, but
the ending.
boss fights were disappointing.
Yeah.
And now that you've seen these 4 Ganon boss fights, you know what Ganon's going to look like.
Yeah.
And he's no different. He's just another purple blob. And that was really disappointing. And
It's another wronged or ruined opportunity for some more character dynamic.
Yes,
I think.
whereas we're fanboying over all this idea of ooh, the game's referring to, it's being self-referential about Zelda and about Link, and that to some people that may come across as really kind of indulgent. Here, I thought the game was very indulgent when it came to Ganon, where at least with those characters, they were also characters in their own right, while also playing to our expectations and our love for the characters from previous games. With Ganon, it's just there was no character there, and to me, it was demise all over again. I'm a demise hater. That's sort of the villain who's revealed at the end of Skyward Sword. I think that makes the whole mythology so much more boring, so much less interesting than Ganondorf, and the story of Ganon. But here it was just this ancient evil that had no connection whatsoever to any kind of personality, and he didn't have a voice. He didn't have anything to say.
But Demise at least has the very hint of personality.
Demise has a hint of personality.
He has
yes.
the character itself. I think the boss fight's amazing. I love the look of it. The character itself does kind of whatever, but he does have the great moment of origins for the storyline, I guess, which is just you and I are going to be fighting forever.
I think we will fight about that. Yeah.
Well, my point is though is that Demise is just like this Ganon out of nowhere for us in a way that it seems to be building up to this moment, and all we get is just the fight and none of the character repercussions. I think with
same.
the villain.
And let's just acknowledge that the ending is so, bim bam, it's done.
Yeah, I think the ending for all
so abrupt.
What's amazing is for all the hate Twilight Princess got with Ganondorf towards the end,
Yeah.
is to compare it with.
At least it was a great fight and a great ending.
Well, to compare it with these two, though, I go, it's amazing. I go to see him sitting on the throne and then talk about religion for a moment. It's just like, whoa, it's like reading War and Peace or something compared to these two.
And let's not forget those incredible boss fights at the end of Twilight Princess, which, if a little bit shoehorned in there, are at least very extremely fun and cinematic and awesome. Whereas
the horse fight is so much better,
and just that boring. Breath of the Wild's boring ass fight outside. That just really disappointed me. But But yeah, and so okay, so let's talk about the ending. So we see Zelda.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think there may be I'm suspecting there may be even be multiple endings to this game. I'm not sure. I almost don't want to spoil it for myself. But you finish and it says, "Oh, do you remember me?" And that's it. Credits roll, and so lame because Zelda has this great tradition since Link to the Past of seeing the world and seeing what happens in the world after you beat it. I think they didn't want to do that for this one because they didn't want to spoil anything for you. If you're going through the world, if you kind of see a flyover of the world and what's happening in the world now that Ganon's gone, they didn't want to do that. But that to me was so disappointing. It was such a boring credit sequence. But then the after credit sequence I found interesting. Or do you have any commentary on this?
Well, my ending is she walks up and holds his hand, and they just start making out.
She whips off her clothes. Yeah. See, Anthony got all the correct scenes. That's the difference. He finished all the
It's like Super Metroid.
I do want to get to that though. There's an element of fan service to that.
Okay, well, no, the ending doesn't seem right because the "Do you remember me" feels so out of place. It's like as if I'm missing some DLC that they want.
Dude, I thought I was missing the memories. I'm like, wait, I got all the memories, right? I got all 21.
Well, side note, let's just say the greatest scene, at least for me, is when you unlock all the memories and you go to the final location in the painting. And you just see the way she finally unlocks her power.
It's
haunting, a beautiful moment. But then we get to the actual ending of the game wants us to see can I ask you? Do you remember me?
Yeah.
Or do you truly remember me? Whatever she said. It doesn't make sense because it's like, wait, I got all the memories. Of course. There seems to be like a attempt at like something kind of like powerful there, but like I don't understand because there's no other context for us to take
it doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
But then the after credits sequence. We see Link and Zelda walking around a little bit. Zelda turns to Link. She says, "Oh, we have to go fix the Divine Beast," which is a little bit confusing. Why do I have to fix the Divine Beast? Anyway, they're kind of back to doing what they were doing before they were both trapped in time. And then she says something like, "Oh, I guess my powers must have waned over the past 100 years."
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? I accept that. And then she gives this kind of big, like, shit-eating grin kind of to the camera. That's you can tell that in the English voice acting it's mute, but I can guess that in the Japanese voice acting she makes a sound, and it's just this kind of, to me it felt fan servicey, but I think the point was, and it was interesting, it was this kind of almost fourth wall breaking moment where it's Zelda saying, maybe the "Do you remember me" fits into this too. It's like my powers have waned. Maybe it's talking about the Zelda franchise itself. It's almost apologizing for whatever mistakes it may have committed. Of course, we're going to disagree about whether that's happened or not, and then saying, but I accept that. I think it's almost, to me, I relate it to Wind Waker, which has almost a similar message at the end that essentially it says, go and found the new Hyrule, forget Ocarina of Time, it's over, we have to move on, So, it was interesting. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that very ending sequence.
No, the meta reading is sort of interesting itself, but
yeah,
I mean,
guess it's the meta level of
but I mean that ending, like it feels so similar. Like the post credit scene you're referring to is very similar to the post credit scene of the Skyward Sword. The Skyward Sword, what are you going to do now? Like it's sort of something similar.
You get to see that they're together, but again, just the way that Zelda's framed in that moment is like, it's like, you win, hero. It's kind of, it just did feel like a step back for this Zelda character who is, I think, who actually was, honest to goodness, developed. Yes, a little bit in the direction of so dark and creepy to have a Zelda who's doubts herself, but I thought it was a good story. It made an interesting dynamic, and there was no payoff at the end. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm curious. Is DLC coming to extrapolate on the story?
They say there's going to be a story DLC.
Which infuriates me.
I'm not into that.
No, especially for a Zelda game. I'm
they
curious.
Say there's going to be another dungeon. Yeah, I hope it doesn't take place after the end of the game. Though I hope it's just going to be.
What is the issue? Is the story DLC Nintendo kind of cynically biting the poison apple of modern game BS?
Perhaps. I mean, the story DLC, we don't know. I mean, I thought about it as more positive, right? The idea that it's like, again, before the end of the game, maybe you get to go to an island or something and get to do stuff there, and a new dungeon that might be more traditional Zelda style. That's what I'm fantasizing about. or a Majora's, like a little mini Majora's Mask-esque.
But you want the game as released to be the
Side
complete story package.
Yeah.
My own theory is, Link is gonna find one of the boats you see, and it's gonna like take you away from Hyrule with Zelda, and she'll like wash away, and you'll have to save her again.
Yeah, or I don't know. Yeah.
I had a question actually for Connor more so because I know Anthony doesn't play a ton of games. How is Breath of the Wild as like an open world game? Like compared to the modern crop, because sandbox games are a dime a dozen now. It's like the thing every AAA game is like a sandbox game now because it's just this very popular thing. And now Nintendo, who we've always seen as kind of this dopey uncle in the video game world. It's sort of like is 10 years late to every trend, and it's sort of like, oh, Nintendo, that's interesting.
Or they just don't follow the trends. Period.
Yeah, exactly. Or they're indifferent to the trends.
Yeah,
but I mean stuff like they don't add online content until like way after everyone else. But they're finally going to this well. Do you think they did it well? Do you think they kind of transcended it? Do you think it's something else entirely?
Yeah.
How does it fit in that context?
This is what I think. This is what Breath of the Wild really is about in terms of like games history. This is a game that essentially it disproved the idea that Nintendo's not interested in trends. It seems like they were paying so much attention. They're almost quoting other games in a way. And they're able to disguise that with their peculiar Nintendo magic. But it's an attempt to honestly take on a genre, the open world game, which we're experiencing such fatigue. I'm going to give you 3 games, basically Assassin's Creed 3, Skyrim, and Far Cry 3. I think those are like kind of the big ones, maybe Red Dead Redemption. These are kind of similar games. Minecraft as well, I think, is an influence. These are games that write the idea of the radio towers, or map clutter, where there's just a million little hunt 5 boar side quests littered everywhere in the world. All this kind of thing. What was very smart is Breath of the Wild picked and chose. Basically, they took the towers, but they did it in a different way, where the towers, you know where they are to begin with, you can see them. With your use of the map is not such that you just have icons everywhere. There's no icon glut because there are no icons. In fact, you make the icons. You discover for yourself. Quests don't just give you, unlike Skyrim where they just give you a mark on your map saying, oh, go find Olaf, let's say, right? Instead, it says, go find Olaf, he's in blah, 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 right? You don't actually see where the icon is. You have to go to that area and explore and find that thing. And finally, what the thing is that it completely improves upon, it finishes, I think, what Skyrim may have been going for, is the sense of epic reality, which was the kind of buzzword they used at that time for Skyrim, to promote Skyrim. But the sense of just exploration and the geography itself facilitates the idea of discovery and just adventure. Just think of when you try to get to Goron City and how much of an adventure that feels like. Just the act of navigation to that place. That's something no other game has done, and it's a real high bar for open world. That's all I want to say about that.
For like a James Bond movie, looking around at the action films around it, picking and choosing and trying to adapt.
Yeah.
Okay, so and where does this rank in terms of the Zelda series? Is this like a top? Is this one of the very best Zeldas? Is it kind of middle of the pack? What do you think?
Well, let me before you answer real quick, I want to amend something to that question though, because I think we both agree that we're happy that Nintendo is trying new things in Zelda and that the exploration aspects are really well. But now I just want to consider that and put everything aside and view all the games. Like Tony said, where would you rank this?
Where would I rank it?
Was that your question?
More or less.
Yeah. I'm going to do kind of I'm going to say it's too soon. First of all, I'll call that a disclaimer. It's too soon.
Okay, so the couple weeks is not enough.
A couple weeks is not enough to determine its place. It's still the latest thing. Okay, we need to kind of. I'll have to I may have to play another Zelda game before I come back and can compare. Breath of the Wild. I would say that it's definitely a great game. I think it's so lacking in the story department. I think that's a big knock against it, honestly. I think it's a huge game for like the modern day. I think it's a big step forward for games in general, which is weird to say. If it's a big step forward for games in general, it's not a big step forward for Legend of Zelda, the franchise. I mean, that's how big Legend of Zelda is. It's almost bigger than the video games themselves, for me personally.
Sure.
But yes, I think it was, to me, I see Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword as a bit of a stumbling block. I've been reevaluating Twilight Princess lately. I would say Skyward Sword was the dip, and Breath of the Wild is the excellent, beautiful kind of recapturing of the magic. And it's even more than that. In some ways, it's I think it is an answer to Ocarina of Time. It's another answer to Ocarina of Time. So I think it's a significant game. I think it would rank under my personal favorites. Maybe even Spirit Tracks, because I have this little fondness for certain story aspects of it. To me, I would say as a game, it's probably better than Wind Waker, for instance. But I still think it's kind of, for me, it's below Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask Wind Waker.
Interesting. I think, unlike Connor, I've always sort of defended Twilight Princess. I always had like a weird love for that one. I know the criticisms, I understand them, but that game really.
There's a lot of really strong things about that game.
Yeah, that game works for me on all levels. I think the Wind Waker, and thinking about what we know of and expect from a Zelda game, even now looking at Breath of the Wild, does everything perfectly that you could expect from that. Which is why I always place it as the greatest Zelda game, actually. I think Breath of the Wild, though, would rank below Majora's.
I'm sorry, what was your best Zelda game?
Oh, I think the Wind Waker is the best Zelda game.
Mm-hmm.
On every level, story, gameplay, mechanics.
Yeah.
I think, of course, certain things can, feel dated, but I think it still holds up. Breath of the Wild, for me, is probably below Twilight Princess, Majora's, Wind Waker, and the Oracle games. The Oracle games, I think, are very underrated.
That's your oddball, Mine's Spirit Tracks, yeah.
In the story department, Oracle of Ages is an amazing storyline. I will defend that one.
Just Ages, not Seasons?
Seasons is okay.
Seasons can help.
Ages is, like, amazing.
Yeah.
The tower, the building.
Queen Ambi, yeah.
And the Twin Rova, Rising of both games.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And okay, guys, last but not least, I know all the listeners have been edging up to this point, waiting for this moment.
Yeah.
It's the Trump tax return moment.
Where does Breath of the Wild fit in the Legend of Zelda timeline?
It's a fascinating subject. This could be its own podcast.
Well, I talked to Miyamoto, so we can end it
talked
here.
to Miyamoto.
This will be the bonus
Let
app
me
to the
just
bonus
first say that the timeline's bull. Timeline really only exists, I think, for the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. Otherwise, it's irrelevant. You don't even need to worry about it.
Yeah.
For this game, they didn't care. I have seen people saying that maybe they should have tried to reboot the timeline almost, or try to kind of give it a fresh start, alternate universe or something.
Which people thought what they were going to do.
They didn't do that in this game. There's explicit references to past games, some that are just so unnecessary. Like, why did you even have to say that? Now I have to deal with what pissed me off so much was when Urbosa activates the Divine Beast, Va Naboris. Which is kind of, I thought, was a clever hint at the idea of Nabooru, who is the Gerudo sage from Ocarina of Time. But then she's like, you were named after Nabooru, which makes no sense, because these things are supposed to be 10,000 years old and created by the Sheikah. Like, how does that work? I guess it could work, but, it just felt so off. And so I wish this game had only hinted at timeline without ever being explicit. Basically, I think you could, if you wanted, if you believe in the timeline, it takes place after Twilight Princess. Yeah. But and it's not in the Wind Waker timeline, but it doesn't really matter.
Well, unlike Connor, he is sort of the John Adams to my Thomas Jefferson, because I am a strict timeline reader.
Connor truly is the Paul Giamatti of this podcast.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think the timeline is sort of a fun idea. I think it's interesting
fun to play
look
around
at. With all the bumblings of Nintendo after they actually released it, it's sort of dissuaded me and kind of disheartened my interest in it sometimes. But I think I agree with Connor. I think there's an obvious hint, which is what does it say, like whether there's a hero on top of the sky or in the twilight.
Yeah, it mentions.
It seems to fit in the child era timeline post Twilight Princess.
Yeah.
All right, guys, this was the stealth pilot to Nintendogs, our spin-off podcast where we talk about Nintendo games. Our current inductee into the games canon is Tropical Freeze, which will probably be number one for the foreseeable future.
Isn't Nintendogs a game?
Yeah, it is indeed.
I'm sure it's already taken of all the Nintendo.
So does Breath of the Wild belong in the 706 Great Games?
Yes. Easily.
Oh, okay. All right. Would every Zelda Most Zeldas?
Phantom Hourglass.
I would exempt Phantom Hourglass too. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, and I also have a strong, displeasure with Link's Awakening.
Four Swords Adventures we could call Link's Awakening.
Tingles.
Link's Awakening is a bit controversial, but
all the consoles though.
No, the disc ones would also be included.
I personally would agree with you. Yes, yeah, not the Famicom disc system. You could cut out Four Swords Adventures in the GameCube. That's the oddball where it's like it's a console Zelda game, but it's kind of like a really shitty console Zelda game. Not shitty. It's just like it's lesser.
It's like a spin-off.
It's a spin-off. Yeah.
For importance in its time.
Much like this episode.
Yeah.
Where does this fit in the 706 timeline?
I don't know.
Let the fans figure it out.
Pre-Kirk, post-Tony.
Yeah, I think it's the Kirk child timeline.
Well, Kirk hasn't been born yet.
Yeah,
or he died. I don't know. One or the other.
Donnie Darko.
All right,
he died. Kirk remained a child because he was sent back in time. Anyway, it's a long story.
That's another David Fincher movie, Benjamin Button, which we're not discussing this week. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you. This is a pleasure. Oh, man.
And
weight off my shoulders.
Next time Nintendo puts out a game, I'm sure we'll have more to say.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Have a good one.